Hello, everybody, and welcome to Big Blue Kickoff Live, the Wednesday edition right here on Giants.com and the Giants mobile app. I am John Schmeelk. With me is Paul Dottino. We're going to get to your calls early today, or at least that's the plan, at 201-939-4513. It's all presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Football Giants. Sorry for being a couple minutes late. Brian Daboll at his press conference outside, and we're happy we stayed to the end because on the last two questions, some news came out. Paul, we have 10 names of guys that are not going to practice today. I'll get to the full list with you in a second.
Yeah.
But the name that's on the top of the list, and I'm sure Giant fans have seen it if you're following on Twitter over the course of the afternoon, is that Daniel Jones will not practice today. Brian Daboll said his neck is more sore today than it was. I'm assuming he meant Monday when he spoke to the media initially this week. Mm-hmm. So he will not practice. He's being considered day-to-day. He would not commit to whether or not he would practice tomorrow. He indicated it has a lot to do with how Daniel feels. But obviously it's going to have to do with what the medical professionals say as well. He would not, despite multiple peppering of questions, he would not go into more detail as to the nature of the injury.
No.
So that is not great for his availability on Sunday, and Tyrod Taylor would start, and right now Tommy DeVito would be the backup, though they did leave open the possibility of potentially adding a veteran over the course of the week.
Yeah, Coach did not want to commit to elevating DeVito. And remember now, the situation for him is he's on the practice squad. You'd have to use one of his practice squad elevations. You get 3 per player per season. You'd have to use one of them this week to bring him up. You could do that. The other thing, as Coach had said, that he has been talking to Joe Shane about it. I haven't looked at the free agents out on the street. I'm not even sure who's out there.
Yeah, but no one you could bring in and have ready in 3 days.
I don't see it.
No. So I think this week you would have to elevate DeVito if Jones can't go.
I totally agree. I mean, that's why, to me, I almost don't know why Coach didn't just say DeVito, would be the number 2 this week. I mean, because I just don't see who else they could possibly get ready in time. But nonetheless, he said that he and Joe are talking constantly, and they're going through it, and they're trying to figure it out. But, the bottom line is that it certainly looks a little bit less promising for Daniel Jones than it did a couple of days ago.
And then the standard guys who have not been practicing will not practice. So no Andrew Thomas, no John Michael Schmitz today. Those are not surprises. Saquon Barkley will practice and do a little bit more than we did last week. So that's good as he continues to trend upwards. Mm-hmm. A couple surprise names that I don't think we expected on this list. One, Matt Parrott with a shoulder. He will not practice in this game. And then you have the one that happened literally on the last answer, which is why I said I'm happy we stayed out there. Darren Waller will not practice with a groin. Brian Daboll seemed to indicate they don't consider that to be a long-term serious thing. He's day-to-day, but he said we'll see about practice tomorrow. He can't commit to that either way. So that could be another injury now to track over the course of the week.
And, of course, McFadden, Robinson, that's Wandell, and Ojulari also on that injured list will not be practicing today. So they got some bodies they got to get healthy for sure.
Absolutely. All right. 201-939-4513. Want to get to your calls here, Paul. While I was, kind of somewhat delirious in bed last week, I was with strep throat. I was kind of just thinking about the season a little bit. And again, this is not to be meant as, excusing how this has gone or anything like that. But I was just thinking generally about, if you could have written a bad novel about how a season could go poorly in the first 4 or 5 games, I think if you were a script writer, they would have said, all right, this is maybe a little bit too much and this is unrealistic. I mean, even heading into this year, Paul, we knew the first 6 games were going to be extremely tough. We talked about it a lot. You thought 3-3. I probably thought closer to 2-4. We had that conversation a lot off the air, right? If you would have told me before the season started in those first 6 games, you'd be without, or I'll even just say the first 5 games, without Saquon Barkley and Andrew Thomas for 4 games and 3 games apiece, I probably would have said 1-5, to be totally honest with you. That's probably what I would have said their record was going to be if they were missing those guys. Throw in John Michael Schmitz missing 2 games in that mix as well. I probably would have said 1-5. Now, record's the record. Then you have things like the quality of the losses, the point differential. That's a different conversation. I don't think anyone thought it would be as lopsided as it's been in a lot of these games.
No.
So not making that argument at all, folks. But, the stat I gave everybody before the year is that the Giants had the toughest pass defense schedule of any team in the NFL this league in terms of teams that they faced. And you look at it in terms of EPA per dropback, they've really played the 3rd, 4th, and 7th best teams in the league this year in terms of EPA per dropback. Pass defense success rate, the best team, the 4th team, the 13th team. Sacks per pass attempt, the 1st team, the 3rd team, the 6th team, the 9th team. Pressure rate, the 1st team, the 4th team, the 5th team, the 11th team, the 13th team.
Right.
So for having this string of injuries on that side of the ball, and now Daniel in the mix too, where they've had him based on the schedule and what was to come down the pike.
It couldn't have come at a worse time.
That's that's the point I'm trying to make. Just the confluence of events is so unfortunate and so unlucky, and obviously trying to make up for those losses and survive them. That's a function of what's happening internally here, and obviously it is what it is. And Brian Daboll said that at today's press conference. That's no excuse. You have to be able to make do with what you have. He was
That's right.
answering specifically about the offensive line. No argument. Not saying that's not true at all. But, maybe this is me feeling sorry for myself a little bit, and that's fine. Whatever. I'll live with that for the first 5 minutes of a show. But just this, you could not have set this up worse.
In short, it's the perfect storm.
Yeah, thank you. That was the word I was looking for. 100%.
Okay? And the bad news is that you can't scheme your way out of a perfect storm. Either the guys that you need to get back in there get healthy, or the backups who are not getting the job done to the appropriate standard have to suddenly raise their level of play so that you can function. But that's it.
If it was just Andrew Thomas, but Saquon was there, maybe you got a shot, right?
But it's just.
But once it's no Andrew Thomas, then no Saquon Barkley, no John Michael Schmitz. You're trying to plug basically now 3 different holes on the offensive line, 3.5 holes on the offensive line. You can't help that many people.
No, you can't.
Without Saquon, you don't have the running game to take the pressure off of that. Without Saquon, we've seen teams just not respect the Giants' play-action pass game at all.
Why would they?
Right? So that's another way you cannot then help out the offensive line.
That's the point.
They're on top of it. The defense, quite frankly, have not played well enough, so you're going down early in these games, which puts more pressure to throw the ball on the offensive line.
And it snowballs.
And there's, I wish I can come with an easy answer here, folks, or a silver bullet solution, except that the guys that are out there have to play better. And you know what? Maybe the guys that are out there aren't capable of playing better. Maybe it's not in them. I don't know the answer to that question. I think the coaches believe they are. I think they can do better as well. Otherwise, they wouldn't be here. That's why they're here, right? That's why the front office has them on the roster. So I think they all know they can. They're trying. But, with the opponents they faced, and we can touch briefly on the Bills here, Paul. I don't want to get too deep into it. We have 2 more shows to do that. But it doesn't get any easier this week. The Bills lead the league in sacks. Now they do have a bunch of injuries on defense. Maybe that opens up a little bit of a window there. But they're very well coordinated with Sean McDermott. And they have a good veteran group that knows how to play defense.
And they will score points. Point blank. They will score points.
Lead the league in takeaways.
This is another very tall mountain to climb for the Giants. Probably not a whole lot different than the San Francisco mountain they had to climb. And, be honest, last week we knew Miami had a very explosive offense, although their defense is not as good as Buffalo's.
Dallas, Miami, and San Francisco are all very good teams.
And that's it. The Giants right now are fighting out of their weight class, John. That's what it comes down to. With the players that they have available to them today, they are fighting out of their weight class. They're a light middleweight going up against heavyweights or junior heavyweights,
and I know people,
or light heavyweights.
I know people say, well, how about Arizona and Seattle? Well, Arizona, they won the game, and you saw what happened when they faced, and right now Arizona has the lowest pressure rate in the league.
But they had Barkley for a lot of that game.
Right, but if you want to look at the second half of that game, Paul, why do you think they're able to protect long enough for Daniel Jones to throw all those yards?
Because Arizona is not very good.
You're playing the worst team in terms of pressure rate in the league.
That's it.
Worst.
That's it.
32nd. I'm looking at the number right here. 32nd.
Because we always tell you the game is about matchups.
Right.
And that matchup allowed for the one-dimensional passing comeback that Jones was able to navigate.
And then against Seattle, I know the end result in the score was 24-3, and all the sacks in the fourth quarter got really ugly.
Right.
Bottom line, it's 14-3, first and goal at the 5-yard line.
Yep.
At the end of the third quarter.
Yeah. Yep.
Now, did the offense do enough in that game, even with that in mind, to win that game? No, probably not. And would they have scored again to maybe win that game? Who knows? We will never know the answer to that question.
The other thing we have to say is no matter how
they were in that game,
the defense did play well But
No, Seattle, they were okay.
they didn't get any turnovers.
Yeah.
Imagine if the Giants had evened out the turnover ratio to 0 instead of -2 in that game. Maybe things change.
And that's the other factor. They're -5 turnover ratio. Like, they
That's-
haven't even caught any luck with the turnover
Tom
stuff.
Coughlin's favorite stat.
You know, we talked about it last year. The one thing, and, you know, we mentioned this, right, with Daniel Jones' interceptions totals being way down last year, and we brought this up in the offseason. You know, one reason, they did not have not one deflection, tip, ball go up in the air for an interception last year.
True.
I don't remember another year in my history covering this team since 2006 where that was the case. You always get one unlucky play here and there where something gets tipped in the secondary at the line of scrimmage, whatever, or something weird happens, and they've had 3 of those already this year.
Yes.
So, look, again, these aren't excuses. It is what it is. Fans should be upset. We understand you're upset. Give us a call. Tell us how upset you are. We'll talk to you about it right here on Big Blue Kickoff Live presented by Cadillac. What's up, Paul?
Final note on
Yes.
the offensive line. Coach Dable did say they were bringing in Lyle Collins for a workout.
For a workout, yes. he
After
did.
today's practice.
And Justin Pugh is coming along, but he did not indicate when he would be ready to play.
He took some team snaps in the last team practice, and he's gonna ramp him up this week.
And Marcus McKeithen will practice today as well.
Yes.
That's the other thing. So
Yes.
just keep that all in mind. All right, 201-939-4513. Go subscribe to the Giants Huddle podcast. My interview with Sean O'Hara is up there right now. Go check that out. We talk a lot about the offensive line. We get really deep inside of it. Sean has some great insight. Make sure you go check that out. And then this week's Papa's Perspective is up as well. We have O.J. Anderson talking about his Super Bowl 25 MVP performance against the Bills, which is great. We have Ahmad Bradshaw talking about the snow game against the Bills and the snow, wind, and rain game against the Bills.
Sleet and everything else.
And everything. The like winter monsoon that we had in 2007. So I think that's posted, right, Pearson? That's up. So go check that out as well on the Giants Huddle podcast. Brought to you by Citizens, the official bank of the Giants. Go to giants.com/podcast, the Giants app, or download it and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, leave a 5-star positive review for all of our podcast folks. We would really appreciate it, including our brand new podcast, The Giants Hangout. Make sure you go check that out. All right, 201-939-4513. Let's get to it. Donnie in Queens is up first. Donnie, what's up, pal?
Hey, good afternoon, guys. How
What's
are
up?
you?
Hi.
Could be better, but we're doing all right, Donnie. We're surviving.
I'll tell you this. I'm glad I didn't get through on Monday because my attitude was a lot worse than it is today. But, you know, to me, the approach this week.
Eric Gray
Pretty
finally had his
simple.
muff for you, Donnie. I was waiting for the "I told you so" phone call out of you.
No, I'm not going to do that. Look, I'm going to even say finally. What does he have? 12 to 15 returns, and he muffed one. I mean, it's just obvious he can't do the job. That's so far from their problems. I don't even want to discuss it. I think this week the Giants have to, and they won't say this publicly, but you almost have to punt on the game. Anybody who is not 100% or has an injury that can maybe get worse, don't play this week. There's no point in trotting Saquon out there this week. If I'm Brian Dable, I need to get this season on track by my bye week, and whether the Giants can take advantage of it or not is a different story. But there's clearly a step down in weight class with Washington and the Jets on the horizon, both at home. Use this week to not further mess up what you already have going. So guys like Waller and Saquon and Schmitz, don't force them back into the lineup this week. Just take the loss that's coming anyway, and then try to get back. Because, you know, if they can somehow right this ship, get to 3-5 by that bye week, you know, it kind of rejuvenates the players here. They'll have confidence against the Washington Commanders this week. The next week, you know, the guys have beaten that team. It's a team they have familiarity with. I hate to say it because it's not the spirit of competition, but they've got to play this thing smart here and get to those games as healthy as possible, and then go from there. And then the last thing I want to say, and I'll just kind of take your thoughts off the air.
Sure.
There's more than just injuries at play here. There was bad decision making by the front office in terms of roster construction. It kind of almost reminds me of the 2017 offseason after McAdoo's first year, where instead of pumping more back into that offensive line, I know they did Schmitz, but they tried to, you know, sign Campbell and Waller. It's like Ingram and Marshall all over again. Where it's like the Giants still haven't figured out that the main issue is and has been that offensive line. So there's more to it. And the stats you brought up in the beginning of the show, those teams playing the Giants certainly skews those numbers.
No,
so
that's
thanks
fair
for the
too.
time.
That's fair too, Donnie.
I'll talk to you guys soon.
Thank you, Donnie.
guys.
Appreciate the call. Yeah, obviously, those are going to pump those up. But it's not like anyone didn't think, like I said, going into the year, that was the projection for a lot of those teams too. But Donnie, fair point. In terms of Paul, and I think Donnie kind of hit it at the end of this call where he said, for the spirit of competition, you can't really do that. And I think inside of building like this, where you're asking guys to put their bodies on the line here every week to try to win football games, it's very difficult to come out and, not show your players that you're asking to, put their blood, sweat, and tears on the field every day, that you're not trying to get as many guys on the field as possible to try to win a football game. I get where he's coming from a big picture perspective, and your logic is sound. I don't disagree with it. And I think when you look at, like baseball or the NBA, I think you can operate that way a little bit. It's a little bit different. But I think it's football, it's tough. When you're asking the guys to go out there and play this type of game, to not give them the best chance to go out there to compete and win, I think that's a tough sell. Though I do understand the logic behind it.
Yeah, you have to remember these guys go through a tremendous amount of agony from the beginning of training camp, if not even the off season. Physically, emotionally, they give up an awful lot, and they go through an awful lot. It's to me, it's unconscionable for a head coach to put less than his best on the field and be able to walk into that locker room or walk that sideline and look those guys in the eye and say, you know what, we're just not going to give everything we've got this week. I don't know how anybody could do that. Again, you're looking at it from a totally different angle when you say that, but from a coach's perspective and a player's perspective, I can't digest it.
So I get then into his other point, and I guess we can discuss this a little bit. Do you think what else could they or should they have done more of in terms of addressing the offensive line in the offseason? I mean, you drafted a center in the second round. You thought you were bringing Bredesen back as one of your guards, and I think when he's played guard this year, Bredesen has been okay. Like, I don't think there's been a huge problem there. And then you figure the other guard spot, you had a combination of Glowinski and Azudu, who was a third-round pick, and
Correct.
You should be able to get the other starter out of there, and then the other one would be your kind of backup swing guy at both spots. So I understand where they were coming from. I don't know what else you were going to look to do necessarily. In retrospect, obviously, would you like to have more bodies there? But it's also hard to anticipate you're going to have, 2 to 3 injuries in your first 5 weeks to guys that you're expecting to play big roles on the offensive line.
I concur, John. Look, I disagree with the comment that he just made, and it's an easy retrospective comment to make when the perfect storm has taken the ship, down into the water. We believed, I think both of us believed, John, this team was a very solid 53 and a very solid playoff contender. And I can tell you that there were many players, who are former players and even NFL analysts, who came through this training camp and said, yeah, you guys got a good team here.
I think everyone had them right in the mix for that in the NFC wild card.
Right, because we all knew Philly was the best team in the division. We knew that.
Right.
Okay, so that was not going to happen. No one had, at least nobody here, no one in this room was walking around saying, oh, they're going to beat Philadelphia for the division.
I said it a million times. I thought you had a top 3 team tier in the NFC with Philly, Dallas, and San Francisco, and then you had the Giants with everybody else. And it looks like maybe Detroit might be on a little bit of a tier above as well.
So, I'm going to say that, that last comment about roster construction is a problem. I think that's way off base because we all believed with an educated eye that this roster coming out of training camp was a worthy roster of being in the playoff conversation. That's the way it is.
Well, yeah, but we could also have been wrong about that too.
Well, then a lot of people who know football would have been wrong. Because I know the Giants certainly felt that way too. This coaching staff and this front office. Yeah, sure. So it's easy now after the perfect storm wound up making your ship take on water. It's easy to say, well, the roster reconstruction wasn't very good. I will never second guess. I always say you have to go back to the time before all the crap started and say, okay, logically, rationally, where were you? And as you said to me, what would you have done differently with this offensive line? I don't know that there's a whole lot that they could have done differently. I think they had fortified themselves as best as they probably could with the resources they had at their disposal to give themselves a better chance. I think that's unquestionable. Again, you want to go 2020 hindsight, you can criticize everything,
All right,
including the weatherman.
Let's go to Hugo in New Jersey. He's up next. Hey, Hugo.
Hey, good afternoon, guys. I think I'm going to be a little bit philosophical on this call, so
Sure, go ahead.
Pardon my philosophical bent, but I guess I'll start with I'm sort of there's the 5 phases of grief, and I think I'm in the acceptance stage now. So it probably doesn't benefit anyone to be in the denial and anger phase. We're going to have constructive conversations. I think we got to dig deeper into the core problems.
But Hugo, I will say this: if there are fans out there that are still in the anger phase, I totally understand that too. I get it.
The acceptance phase is knowing that your car has a flat tire, okay,
and you have to start fixing it,
and squeaky brakes. Right. And it's like, okay, I can't drive this down the turnpike because it's got a flat tire and squeaky brakes. So can't cry about it, can't scream about it. Now what do you do?
Exactly. So, John, and this wasn't part of my call, but to answer your question, I think one thing that happened in the off season that actually a lot of fans were hurt about because we loved the player so much was we could have retained Nick Gates, who provides center, guard, and maybe even tackle flexibility, and he didn't really get a big money contract from Washington. So if you recall in the offseason, and I think myself and Len from Columbia, Maryland were sort of the guys beating the drumbeat. I remember Len saying we don't have a natural center. I mean, we eventually got John Michael Schmitz, but there was no guarantee we would get John Michael Schmitz in the draft. So that may have been,
all right, that's fair.
One thing we could have done. One thing we could have done better. Okay,
I'll buy that.
Hugo, but in the interest of fairness, Hugo, in the interest of fairness, I'll let you finish. The deal was $8 million guaranteed, fully guaranteed, 3 years for $16.5 million. Average per year, 5.5 a shot.
What was his cap hit this year?
Okay, his cap hit this year is only 3.2, most actually about 3.3 according to Over the Cap. But having said that, the Giants were adding a lot of medium range veterans. They added a bunch of people to the offense for the firepower. They added, Waller. They added some receivers. They spent big money on Okereke. I guess what I'm saying to you is, I don't necessarily know that they had the money to fit Gates under these circumstances. It would have been very, 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 very tight at the time when he signed.
Understood, but I do understand his point at the time because you don't have John Michael Schmitz yet. Why fans would have wanted to retain him at that point?
We wanted him back too.
Correct. So,
but the money got a little rich.
That's fine, but
it's
a fair argument.
Look, we have attachment. We have so much attachment to that player, and we talk about resilience. I mean, all you have to do is point to that guy in the locker room, and he's the emblem of resilience, right? Based on what he had to come back from. So I think it's cultural things as well as additional depth. But here I'm going to make a football point because we know what's going on the offense. It's just now a lack of talent and people playing all different positions, right? But the only thing that does upset me is sort of what I'm seeing on defense, which is a relative lack of physicality. And when I think about it, all you have to do is compare and contrast a Giants wide receiver screen to someone running a wide receiver screen against the Giants defense. I'm actually surprised that Cordell Flott has been the most physical guys coming up from the at 175 pounds, by the way, coming up from the secondary to muddy up the blocking scheme on these wide receiver screens. I love Deonte Banks, but I think he could do a better job there, especially given his reputation as a physical player. And frankly, I hate to call him out, but Adoree', I've seen him avoid contact. I've seen him stop his feet back up and just take on the blocker. I don't know what changes that, because that to me is a little bit of, do you want to take on the physical contact and blow up the play or not? But I think that's certainly something that can change. You can't get beaten when a quarterback's only making 3 passes downfield. That's just
Hugo. Hugo, what I think we can agree on is that giving up 151 rushing yards per game. And to your point,
that's the other one.
All those big plays last week on short passes, you can't have that and survive as a defense.
No.
And it happened in San Francisco and holding the edges. To me, that's physicality. And I don't know if
Partly.
the players aren't good enough or maybe the training camp wasn't physical enough. And I don't know what it is, but that is one thing you can point to that is bothersome to me. The offensive line woes at this point, it kind of is what it is, right? So, look, guys, I think it's darkest before the storm. That's a philosophical point.
Dawn. Darkest before the dawn. Darkest before the dawn.
I'm sorry.
We are in the middle of the storm, Hugo. The storm is all around us right now.
Oh, my. Yes.
I got the quote wrong.
It's okay. It's okay.
I kind of agree with that. I think, October 22nd, let's see what kind of team we could assemble. And we could put together somewhat of an offensive line. And John, you've indicated what I agree with. I think if they're healthy, it should be Thomas, Azudu, JMS, Bredesen, and Neal. And the reason why I moved Bredesen to right guard is because he's the most experienced. He's probably our best guard at this point. And I want to see Evan Neal with a competent right guard. Okay, I'm going to give Evan Neal a break on this.
Mm-hmm.
That musical chair of the person playing next to him and not getting good play from the guy next to him, I think is hurting him. And by the end of this year, we need to find out. So that would be one point.
Hurry up, Hugo. We got to run. Last point.
Okay, I'm gonna make this last point. History repeats itself. I was a kid in the late 70s, and the Giants were playing a Monday night game, and they sat Joe Pisarcik for the game. And start some guy. I think his name was Randy Goldstein. I think, but
Jerry
anyhow,
Goldstein.
Oh, okay, right. Of course, you would remember. But the stated reason was because our offensive line was so bad. Is he didn't have a specific injury. He was just so beaten up behind that offensive line that they had to rest him that week. And I could remember the sadness in Frank Gifford's voice when he was explaining the situation on that Monday night game. And another thing I fear, because people are now using, could Daniel Jones become, David Carr? I'm more concerned that he may end up being Andrew Luck, a big, physical, mobile quarterback who took hit after hit after hit and had to retire in the prime of his career. So let's protect our quarterback. Let's go Giants.
Thanks, Hugo.
Hugo, there's another scenario that kind of refers to what you just did. Back in 1979, the Giants had drafted Phil Simms number 1, and Ray Perkins fully disclosed to all the public and the media that Phil Simms is not going to play as a rookie. Our intention is to make him sit for his entire first season. He will not play. Well, of course, what happened? Joe Pisarcik was getting the living stuffing beaten out of him because the offensive line was as bad as it could be. And it was so bad that Pisarcik was so incredibly beaten up, they had no choice. And they put Phil in. And Phil got his first start and won 5 games in a row as a rookie. But the idea was not to play him for the first year, but they just couldn't get Pisarcik healthy enough to get on the field.
To give you, and I forgot to bring this one up, Paul, at the start of the show. But and I know you don't like PFF tracking data, but I think you'll like this one.
Okay.
So every year they track pressures given up by all people. They even give some pressure responsibility to quarterbacks, right?
Okay.
So this is just pressures given up by offensive linemen last season. So the most pressures given up by any individual offensive line this year, again, just the offensive line, not the quarterback, just the lineman, 212 over the course of a year. Okay?
Right.
This year, the Giants' offensive line only, again, same way of tracking it, are on pace to give up 326.
That's a lot.
I just wanted to explain that this is not like normal bad.
Yeah.
It's beyond that. So when you talk about why the offense isn't functioning, this isn't, they're like 28th. This is like borderline historically bad.
We said perfect storm. Okay, you ever see the movie?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's not just a drizzle, John.
No, it's not a drizzle. All right, let's go to Mike in Virginia. He's up next. Hi, Mike.
How you doing, guys? Thanks for taking my call. I've got a bunch of points to make.
Sure.
Bear with me.
Fire away.
The biggest problem is all the players we just signed big contracts, and none of them are playing well. Daniel Jones, there's not much you can say. They got no offensive line. He's getting killed. Andrew Thomas, on a block kick, he gets hurt, pulls his hamstrings out for 5 weeks. Totally unacceptable. The guy's not in shape. I guess the Giants never run in training camp, so they're soft and they get hamstring injuries.
Well, Mike, FYI, last year, for an example, the Giants had one of the lowest rates of soft tissue injuries in the entire league.
Right.
Just FYI.
So that doesn't just change overnight. They don't become dumb overnight. And be honest with you, Thomas got hurt on an explosive acceleration trying to get after a guy on the block punt, on the block field goal.
Something he doesn't do normally.
Correct.
Playing his position.
That's not what an offensive lineman does. So that was an unusual muscle exertion,
body
if you will.
usage, yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, you got to be careful with what you're saying on that.
All right, let me continue.
Sure.
Leonard Williams, $32.5 million, got 12 tackles, half a sack.
Production's not there. Yeah, production. Well, it is the final year of his contract, and I don't think there's any doubt that the production has not been what he or anybody else would like.
Yeah, he's definitely gone. Azeez Ojulari, now he pulls his hamstrings all the time. He can't practice every day because of his hamstrings. You keep talking about him coming back with Thibodeau. It's going to make a difference. It's not. You can't count on the guy.
Well,
Dexter Lawrence,
his quad has also been an issue too. Go ahead.
Okay, well, he's been on the team for 2.5 years, missed half the games.
No, that's
Dexter
fair.
Lawrence,
That's fair.
Dexter Lawrence, another star, gives himself a nickname. He's got 19 tackles, no sacks. I don't want to hear the excuse that he's getting double teamed. The guy in the Rams gets double teamed all the time, makes plays.
Actually, Dexter Lawrence has probably been the most consistent Giants player on defense from week 1 till now. He's actually played pretty well, but it doesn't show up because the body of work on this entire unit has not been good enough.
Yeah, just to give you a stat on Dexter Lawrence, he is 25th in the league right now in terms of pressures. So for a nose tackle, and then remember that includes all edge rushers too. So that's everybody. He's 25th in the league right now in terms of pressures, which for a nose tackle is not that bad of a number. Just FYI.
But he's got to make some big plays.
No, that's fair. 100%
Understood.
fair. No argument.
Understood.
McKinney, hopefully Shane doesn't get suckered into signing him a big contract. He makes very few big plays. I was at the Arizona and San Francisco game. He got run over at the goal line by the quarterback. He should have leveled the guy. So Doris Jackson, the guy talked before, looks like he gets away from making tackles. So I'm pretty sure that I'm hoping Williams is going next year, Jackson. I love Barkley, but you can't give Barkley a contract after this year. What can you give him, $7 million? He's hurt once again, and he's out there. He's tough. So, and then you got even Gano to sign him to a contract. He's not kicking well.
He missed one kick. He missed one kick.
And had one block.
He missed one kick.
Now he's got a block. He's missed another one. He's not kicking the ball like
he had one. He had one block.
He had one block and one miss.
Those are the facts. One block and one miss.
How many field goals has he made? 3 or 4?
He has like 4 50-yarders alone. He had 3 50-yarders in one game.
Let me just say something.
I appreciate the
There's
call.
a lot you can go after. Graham Gano is not one of the guys you want to go after. I'm sorry.
Hey, look, your points are valid. If your overall point is that the Giants' best player is not making enough big plays,
that's fine.
No argument.
But don't go after Graham Gano.
No argument. And just FYI, and again, this comes back to the Giants being in bad game flow situations. In terms of win rate as a pass rusher, Dexter Lawrence is 17th this year, and Leonard Williams is 26th amongst all pass rushers. Mm-hmm. So you're looking, 4 to 6 of those guys per team, 30 teams, 180? I mean, you're looking in the top 20 percentile for both those guys. So again, are the big plays there? No. But again, sacks are a product. They're almost a team stat in a lot of ways, as much as your individual one. So
that's true.
201.
I think those guys would even like to have better numbers though themselves.
In terms of overall production and making the actual play?
Yes.
1,000%. No one's arguing with that. Just telling people.
Try to put it in full context.
I'm just giving people the underlying numbers that sometimes can be more predictive, which might tell you, all right, maybe that means plays are coming. You know what I mean? If usually the pressure numbers are where they are, eventually the plays will start to come down the line. What they have not so far. No argument there at all. All right, let's go to Tim in Charleston. He's up next on Big Blue Kickoff Live. Hi, Tim.
Hey guys, how you doing? I got a couple of things. First, I want to agree with a couple of the callers today. Donnie, I agree with Donnie saying, if people are hurt, just sit them. I just agree with everything he said about that. With Hugo made a point, it made me think, it's like about, the physicality of defense. And I'm trying to remember if more than once this year, watching any of these games, if I ever said, oh, what a hit by our defense. And I'm not talking about anything dirty. I'm just talking about a clean, hard hit where guys just like laid out, and you're like, wow, I don't remember that. So then,
Tim, honestly, look, like they talked about it pretty openly how missed tackles were a problem this year. So if you have missed tackle issues, part of that is going to be physicality. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, but I mean, the tackles you make could be a little tougher. But anyway,
no, that's fair too.
I got a question, and I to go back to the last game, just one thing, because nobody's brought it up, and then one last little silver lining thing at the end is the play before A-Chain ripped off that 74-yard touchdown.
Okay.
I think it was second and from the 6-yard line, 2nd and 6 or 2nd and 10 or whatever it was from the 6-yard line. And Tua steps up to the line of scrimmage and throws the ball for that, 12-yard or whatever it was, first down pass or 18-yard first down pass. But I'm on the play. I'm like, he's over the line of scrimmage. At least his foot seemed to be on it. And if you release the ball past the line of scrimmage, it's past the line of scrimmage.
No, Tim. As long as any part of your body
Correct.
is behind the line of scrimmage, you're behind the line of scrimmage.
Okay, so then I'm wrong because at least part of them was. But I was surprised the announcers didn't say anything. It didn't look like they wanted to review it. So here's the best silver lining I can come up with out of this debacle.
Okay.
It's like at least we don't have to worry about our coordinators being hired away as head coaches next offseason.
Thank you, Tim.
And I'll take it off the air, guys.
I appreciate it.
Okay.
I'm not sure what to say about that.
No.
201-939-4513. Guys, remember to. And look, I understand 1-4. Everyone's now all of a sudden they're assuming it's going to be 1-5. We're not doing that. And look, the playoffs at that point look slim. I get it. But there is still time for the rest of the year to at least show that you can play better football. The talent on the roster is not reflected in how they played in the first 6 games, and they could play better than that. So while I know the record might turn people off, there is still a lot to learn about where this team is and where this roster is the rest of the year.
You're not kidding.
Because how you construct your offseason and how you operate will have a lot to do with what this team looks like when some of these guys get back on the field healthy.
Mm-hmm.
Because, it could be, all right, well, we need total tear down. Okay, we need to tweak. We need to bring certain guys back, not other guys back. Those types of things and your plans can change based on how these final 12 games go.
And those games are significant because too many times when you fall out of a race with, let's say, a month to go, and now everybody says, well, look what happened the last 2 or 3 weeks of the season, but that's a small sample size. If you really want to grade where a young player's learning curve is or where his potential line is going to go, you need to see a bigger body of work.
Correct.
And so that's why these games are still incredibly important to this coaching staff and to this front office, which goes back to the point we had with a caller earlier when he said, I wouldn't necessarily play the best guys to try to win. Well, no, you kind of have to, because you want every player on this team to have the best circumstance that you can give them to show their best effort and to give their maximum output on the field so that you have a legitimate judgment as to what they are.
And again, I would say don't overestimate the team performance over the final, few games, depending on where the season is. But as individual players, you definitely want to track out individual players.
You don't think the Lions' plans changed from halfway through the season to the end of the season last year?
1,000%.
Without a doubt.
That is a perfect example. Thank you, Pearson. That is good. Have you had, by the way, any luck with Paul setting you up with any lady friends, Pearson, over the last week or two?
Wow.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I don't know. I heard there was something on the show while I was sick about you being an eligible bachelor or something like that. Is that accurate? No? Nothing like that happened?
I don't know. I'll have to check the archives.
Well, you know what? We'll call up the networks and see if we can get a show for Pearson. We'll fix him up that way.
201. Wow, I thought you played into that a little bit, Chris. I'm a little disappointed. 201-939-4513. I'll figure out the point and needle you next time. Don't forget, you can take your fam to the next level with a season ticket membership. Stay connected to the club all year round, not just on game days. Memberships are available. So are individual game tickets, by the way. To learn about both, go to Giants.com/tickets. Limited inventory is available. Go download Giants TV, the Giants official connected TV streaming app. It brings original video content like this show and game highlights on demand and direct to Big Blue fans. Giants TV is free on Apple TV, Roku, and Amazon Fire TV and the Giants mobile app. I mean, who doesn't want these two faces on a gigantic screen that you can stare at for an hour every day? I know you might be the first, but we appreciate you guys watching the show. 201-939-4513. 201-939-4513. Let's go to Mike in Virginia. He's up next. Hey, Mike.
Hey, how y'all doing today, fellas?
Hi.
What's up, man?
Just want to go over a couple things. Like, I remember in preseason, all the talk was about how the defense was looking, how the secondary was looking. And then you see what's transpiring on the field. So it's like, was the offense that bad to make it seem like the defense was doing that well? Because what we're seeing on this field right now, and I'll say secondary-wise, it's just, I don't see how you digress this bad in year 2 of the system when you were doing pretty good the first year. And we're seeing like somebody, like, I don't know where the error was, but we all know there was an error. You have Williams on Hill in press and no help over top. Now, I don't know if McKinney blew that or it was just a bad call, but it's like, where does these things come from?
Well, look, Mike. Mike, I'll put it this way. I don't know if necessarily an error was made, but here's how I'll kind of try to explain it to you. Right? Last year, the Giants won the amount of games that they won. Right? Paul, how many playoff teams did the Giants beat last year on the way to the playoffs?
They didn't.
They beat Jacksonville.
Yeah,
that was it.
That's true.
One.
You're right.
And that was
You're
a
right.
game that was decided by like an inch at the goal, like literally
Yes, it was.
an inch
Yes, it was.
at the goal line. Okay.
Good call.
Of the playoff teams, Mike, that the Giants did play last year. Okay, they lost to Seattle 27-13. They lost to the Lions 31-18. They lost to Dallas twice, and they got blown out by Philadelphia twice, and they lost to Minnesota 27-24.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the playoff teams they faced and lost to last year, okay? The teams that they've faced early this year are not really comparable, except for Arizona, who they did beat, by the way, to the teams that they faced. Like, last year they beat the Commanders once, they tied them once. They beat the Texans. They beat the 2 games, and I think this is what you want to channel this week against Buffalo. They won Green Bay and London and home against the Ravens. Those 2 teams did not end up making the playoffs, but they were better
At the time,
teams.
they were tougher teams.
Correct. You want to channel one of those games this year. So I think it's a combination of that with them being shorthanded. Andrew Thomas played every game last year. Saquon Barkley played every game last year. You know, the Giants, while they had some injury issues, like Evan Neal missing some time, they were relatively healthy throughout a lot of the year at a lot of the important spots. So I think you combine the competition that you're facing early in the year with the injuries. That's why, to me, it looks so much different than it did last year. And to your point in the preseason, you know, I think the offense looked okay in camp, to be honest with you. I think the offense in camp was fine. I thought they did a pretty nice job. So maybe was that an indication that the defense wasn't where you wanted it to be? Maybe. It's hard for me to really put that into context, but they held their own against Detroit in joint practices. That wasn't a lopsided affair when they faced the Lions out there in Detroit for 2 days of practice. It was back and forth. Detroit won some plays, Giants won other plays. Giants won one day, Detroit won the other day. So I didn't see that in the joint practices, so that's why I go back to the level of competition and the injuries. And again, this is not an excuse. I'm just trying to explain the why as much as possible, which is why it's been as lopsided as it has been early this year. And to Paul's point, it's been a cascading effect. You know, the offensive line got hurt. You lost Andrew Thomas. Then Saquon gets hurt. Then Daniel gets hit so much, he gets spooked. He's not playing as well because he's worried he's going to get annihilated on every play he drops back to throw. And maybe spook's the wrong word, but he gets a little wary in the pocket because he's worried that guy's going to come after him. So everything cascades on top of each other, and that's kind of how you get to where you are here at 1-4.
I love to talk about football as a spider web, right? I like to talk about football as a spider web. When you start knocking off some of those connections, what happens to the web? It just falls apart. And if you want a different analogy, some of these bad things that happen to the team are like a row of dominoes on a table. You knock off 2 or 3 in a row, the rest of them just start to fall with it.
Or building a house of cards, right?
Building a house of cards, sure.
Now, the goal is, Mike, and in fairness, the goal is to not have your house be made of cards. Your goal is to have your house be made of enough bricks where if 1 or 2 bricks pop out, guess what? You're still going to be okay. But the problem is that 2 of the bricks that fell out were foundational cornerstones in Andrew Thomas and Saquon Barkley. So that's why I think, again, it's not an excuse. It doesn't make things okay. It's just trying to explain as to kind of why things happen. Now, go ahead. I'm sorry for interrupting you.
I mean, no, you're fine. You're fine. Well, okay. Our receiving core, right? I do not see, and it's just like nobody can get open. Even though there's lack in protection, when he does have time, he's back there and he's looking, and nobody can get open, and that has been an issue for years.
No, Mike. Look, I don't think anyone would argue, Mike, that the receiving core is a finished product.
What is his name? Hyatt. Like, get him some screens or something. You got to do something to get this offense rolling a little bit. I mean, I'm a coach. I do understand how stuff can. Hey, man, sometimes you just start pressing and you get in your head and you start making mistakes. But it's getting to a point where it's like, hold on now, we got to stop the bleeding somehow.
No, look, Mike,
so what can we do to stop it? Like, I don't think they use Breida enough, Hyatt enough. And honestly, man, bottom line, they got to protect this QB, whoever's back there. This is bad. They showed a play where the center got beat and both tackles.
Yeah.
So where is Jones going to step up to?
There's nowhere to go. There's nowhere to go.
Look, I'm sure it's happened at one point in your coaching career.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate the
or maybe you've been fortunate enough not to have it happen to you. Whereas John used the word, the confluence, or the phrase, the confluence of events. This is such a large pile of negative things that have happened. There's so many hand grenades that have been dropped onto this team right now that you just can't scheme it away. I wish it was that simple. I wish it was, hey, give Hyatt another 15 snaps. Give Breida another 10 snaps. Throw 3 or more screens in the first half. I wish it was that simple to scheme. You can't just scheme this away.
And Paul, look, and I've said it before. I go back and I watch, as painful as it can be sometimes, I go back and I rewatch every game on all 22.
I know.
And they've tried different things. They've tried to keep tight ends.
They absolutely have.
They've tried to just go 5 wide, empty, get the ball out quick. They've tried play action, naked boots. Like, they've tried the wide receiver screens to Wan'Dale Robinson. They've tried pre-snap motion. Like, they've tried a lot of different stuff here, and just nothing has worked.
The part that really gets to me is that I'll go back, like you say, John, you'll watch and you'll say to yourself, holy crap. How did that happen? Right?
Like,
how many times does that happen on Monday morning?
Yeah, like you had the play last week where there was the miscommunication on the offensive line, and Evan Neal tries to pick up the linebacker that fake blitzes instead of picking up the guy in the end. And you're just like, well, how does that happen?
Or the bomb to Hill over Hawkins.
Right.
We know this. Right. Folks, John and I were talking about this morning. The odds of them telling Hawkins play man-to-man press on the outside against Hill, and you're not going to get any help. The odds of that play being called are 1,000,000 to 1.
I would say it's unlikely.
Right? Okay,
it's unlikely.
But you watch it on TV, then you watch it on the All 22, and you're like,
that's what it was.
Oh, wow. Something was definitely wrong with that recipe.
And I can't even now. Maybe, I don't know. Again, I said this on Monday show. I don't know what would happen there or who was at fault or whatever. But like I can't get mad at Hawkins.
No,
sixth rounder for getting beat off the line by Tyreek Hill.
No,
it's just
exactly.
It's just a very
and
tough
I'm
spot
sure.
To be in.
And
now,
I'm sure
maybe he shouldn't have been pressed. Maybe that was his fault. I have no idea. But Paul, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I'm sure that there was a better play called, but for whatever reason, it wasn't run properly.
Yeah, correct.
And that's what makes you like just like bang your head against the wall.
And that's the stuff that's frustrating because that's not talent related,
right?
Injury related. You know what I mean? And that's the stuff that's happened in addition to some of the other stuff, which is what I think is probably the most frustrating thing to the coach.
And then other times, and the coach who's just on the phone can attest to this. There's other times where the other team just called the right play for your defense, or they called the right play for your offense, and they just burned you.
Yep, that happens too.
And that's happened a bunch of times. Then there have been flat out other times where the Giants defense has just missed tackles. Physically, it wasn't a mental mistake. Yep. It wasn't a good play call. It's that they physically botched the play.
They basically checked every box of how to fail at this point.
Yes.
Which is why there's no common denominator, which is why it's hard to just find the magic wand solution. Right.
Bingo.
All right, we got 2 more calls, folks. We appreciate you being with us today on Big Blue Kickoff Live, presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Football Giants. Cliff in New York, and then Coach and Marvin will wrap us up. Hi, Cliff.
Hey, guys. Thanks for all the answers to the questions. I'm sitting here thinking about response to adversity that we hear so much about when they're looking to draft players. They want to find people that have been through some stuff and how they handled it, as opposed to guys that were like lights out superstars and never really were challenged by things going wrong. And I have no complaints about the roster construction. I was a Nick Gates supporter, and I got a really good explanation at the time that we had to let him walk. And nobody was asking where's Nick Gates when John Michael Schmitz was on the field.
Right.
I can understand people looking, to find reasons, but the perfect storm is the explanation. I mean, when we don't. How often, number one, do you get a field goal blocked? When it is blocked, how often is it returned at all? When it is returned at all, how far does it go? And how far does it go for a touchdown? And does your best player get hurt trying to chase down a fleet blocked kick return?
Think about those levels, right?
Yeah, the block has to be to the point where it's not beyond the line of scrimmage, right? So that's 1.
Right.
It can't go out of bounds. That's 2. It has to bounce to a defensive player. That's 3. And then your guy has to yank a hammy when he's trying to chase him down.
I mean, they talk about the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, right? A lot of people joke about that, and they give you layer on top of layer on top of layer.
That's the 6 degrees of things going wrong.
Exactly. I mean, this is like that 8-layer cake that just collapsed right before your very eyes, before you had a chance to take a bite out of it.
Absolutely. Now losing 2 guys on the scrum play, the brotherly shove. We never practiced that play in pads, is my understanding.
They practice in pads, but they walk it through. They don't do it full contact.
Right.
Right. So they really didn't have any. I was totally down with going for it on 4th and 1. I was just not looking for them to go straight up the middle with Bobby Wagner sitting there. But I guess they wanted to try it that way.
Yeah, I couldn't tell. By the way, I looked at it a few times. I can't tell what happens to John Michael Schmitz. He just disappears into a calamity of men, and I have no idea what happened.
Exactly.
The Bellinger thing was weird. It was almost a non-contact injury on the play. He just pushes off the leg, and
I have no idea why.
Bends down, he grabs it. He's barely being contacted by anyone when it happened. So the Bellinger injury on that, and by the way, we ended up playing last week anyway, so it wasn't that big of a deal.
Right.
But that had nothing to do with the play. That was just the way he pushed off, somehow tweaked his knee on that.
John Michael Schmitz reminded me of James Earl Jones walking into the cornfield at Field of Dreams.
He just disappears.
He just disappears.
Yeah, a little bit. He does. You're right.
Well, it's nice to have a backup center who is a center. And that sounds like something that a more advanced team would have. I don't know how many teams have a backup center who's not a guard sliding over because he thinks he can do it. And we went through this in the draft, and we were so delighted to get him because we looked at the centers around the league last year in the playoffs, and half of them were drafted as centers, and the teams that advanced in the playoffs all had centers that were drafted as centers. And then Paul, you chimed in later that it's okay if a guard's been in the league for a while and tries to slide over to center. That's been proven to work. So we didn't have that. So I was thinking that that was tough to. We weren't ready to lose first line players on the offensive line in terms of the advance of the team with depth. I mean, they've been looking for depth since Gettleman. Nick Gates was one of Gettleman's accomplishments. He finds him as a free agent. He develops him, and so was Lemieux, and you just can't pick depth off of trees. I don't know what we're going to do going forward, but I don't think it's punting in Buffalo to sit Daniel or Saquon. If it's a question of them just not being ready to play. But
no,
I know,
of course. If the guys are hurt and they're not ready, they're not ready. Then you don't play them.
That's it. Case closed.
Yeah.
The trainers will have the final word.
And Coach Dable is never going to say he's not going out to try to win every game, and he absolutely means it, and so does everybody that works for him. And I think I'm just feeling pretty good. This is where I think it helps to have gone through the 60s and 70s, suffering in silence with a brief interruption with Fran Tarkenton and Ron Johnson and Bob Tucker. And beyond that, it was a very, very long stretch. And then we started having some serious hope, and we really turned things around. And I recommend what I was doing last night. I stumbled on the NFL greatest games of the 2007 win in Green Bay. That was a really nice thing to see. And a big theme of that broadcast was the character issues. Coughlin comes on and Corey Webster comes on and the Green Bay losing team comes on. Everybody's got character in that. I recommend that. And I think that's what the coaches and the front office is looking for right now.
All right, Cliff. We got to go, pal. I appreciate it. We got a couple minutes left. I want to make sure we give Coach Marvin in Delaware his go here. Coach Marvin, you'll wrap us up here, buddy.
How you doing, John and Paul?
Hi, Coach.
Yeah, there's just tough times, and I feel for you guys. It's almost like me coaching again. You guys are taking the pounding from these people.
Look, that coach. That's why we're here. Fans are going to be upset. And look, we aren't happy either. I mean, to be quite honest with you. So we get it.
Yeah, I get it too. And some of them have some good points, but I don't think they see the full picture because they're not in the room. You got to be in the room. They make it almost sound like, we set ourselves up to fail. These guys don't. I mean, they drafted out of the same pool as every other team. We coming into the season in August, we thought we had a pretty good team. We went out and got some Waller. That was a big pick. Everybody on the phone talked about it. Not one person said, why we get him? He sucked. You got Campbell. You get Hyatt in the draft. You got John Michael in the draft.
Drafted Banks, signed Okereke. They made a tremendous amount of positive moves during the offseason. To criticize the front office at this point, I'm sorry. I'm not going to swallow that because
until you see what this group looks like with everyone out there, it's hard to really make a judgment call.
You know the problem is, Coach Marvin, and I'll let you finish in half a second here. The problem is you got too many folks out there who think it's as easy as Madden football or as easy as fantasy football. But this is the real NFL. And there's a lot of factors that can go into derailing a team.
Yes. Yeah, it is. And injuries is the main one that can derail the team. They got tons of injuries. But speaking of the draft, you can only draft who's in front of you, who's in front of your face. If the guy you want is gone, you can't do anything about it. You can only get free agents that are free agents. If he's not in front of your face, you can't get him. You want offensive linemen? Who in the world? Which one of these teams are going to give up an offensive lineman? None of them are going to trade their offensive lineman because there's not a lot of them. Because in college they don't play the same way. They don't play the same game as in the NFL. So the offensive linemen are different. So you got to find special ones that can produce. So it's not many of them coming out of the draft that can turn your whole organization around. So you get what you get. And so you're going to have to work with it. It's people like making it sound like they're not even trying. It may look like it because they're not really competing. But, like John said, look at that schedule that they play. The Dolphins and the San Francisco 49ers, they're doing something that no other team is doing. They're doing something that is historic. What they did is they taking college ethics on offense. And if you look at a college game and see where the hash marks are compared to the NFL, they're so wide open. Mm-hmm. So you can play on one half of the side of the field, and the other side is wide open. So what does that do? that spreads your zone or that sets your man up in a wide open field, man to man, where he got complete field to burn you. And that's why Hyatt was so good at Tennessee. And now what San Francisco and Miami is doing, they have the hashes in the middle of the field. So they want to stretch you out. So what do? They motion you wide to spread your zones open wider.
And get you unbalanced too, Coach.
And what happens? You're right. They playing horizontal and vertical. So what does that give you? What does that equal? It equals leverage. And in this game, angles and leverage is big. And if you can get those, you're going to get alleys. And that's what's happening to them. And my last point, the guy saying, yeah, I understand. I can hear what he's saying. Rest them. Let's get ready for the second half. Okay, I have players that were hurt, and the doctor gives him a note that tells me he can play. He tells me in practice as though he can play. So why am I going to tell him, you know what, sit down. Don't play.
Can't do it.
Thank you, Coach.
You can't do it to them.
No, look, we hear you, Coach, and I think that's the competitive spirit there. One more quick one. We have a tweet that somebody sent in that I want to get to. Andrew Ilnicki, he said he couldn't get through. He said enjoyed the whole music, but he couldn't hold on, so he dropped off. Why aren't the Giants, this is from Andrew, trying Evan Neal over at left tackle after Andrew Thomas got hurt? That's his natural position. I don't understand why they wouldn't look to get some production out of him. Because he just worked a whole year on the right side. He had played a full year at Alabama on the right side. His most recent year at Alabama was at left tackle, but the year before that was on the right side. And I think you probably think you set him back by actually trying to change his footwork midseason.
I tweeted him back that same answer. I think if you toy with him now after what he's tried to do to get the right side down, you're going to send him on a regression. I really do.
I agree. Paul, always fun, my friend.
You too, John.
I'm back with Jonathan Casillas tomorrow at 12:30 for another episode of Big Blue Kickoff Live. Come in, check us out, have some fun, and check out the archive, of course, on the Giants podcast platforms. Just search for Big Blue Kickoff Live. For Paul Dottino, I'm John Schmeelk. Great job by the callers. We'll see you next time.